They saved for years to live in Tokyo. They found the perfect house, quiet, affordable, tucked away from the noise of the city. What they weren't told was why it was so cheap. Something happened there, and something never left. Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. If you enjoy slow burn dread, cursed places, and the kind of horror that follows you into silence, hit like, subscribe, and settle in, because some houses don't just hold memories. They breed them. They arrived in Tokyo with the kind of excitement that makes you ignore the weight of your luggage. Mark held 2 coffees in one hand and their new keys in the other, his knuckles white with the cold and the thrill. Beside him, Ellie kept turning in place, as if she could take in the entire neighborhood at once. Rows of compact homes, tidy hedges, a vending machine humming softly at the corner, the distant rattle of a train line somewhere beyond the buildings. The air smelled like winter rain and asphalt warming under weak sunlight. "This is real," Ellie whispered, laughing like she might cry. "We live here." Tokyo had been a dream for years. Late-night documentaries, language practice apps, a shared list of places they swore they visit. Tsukuji's early morning bustle, Shinjuku's neon canyon, tiny ramen counters where steam fogged the windows. They had saved and planned and worked extra hours and delayed vacations until finally the timeline stopped being someday and became a flight confirmation. They didn't come to Tokyo to feel like tourists forever. They wanted a home, and they had found one. The house sat back from the street behind a low wall. Its exterior was plain cream siding, dark roof tiles, narrow windows that reflected the overcast sky. A small entry path led to a recessed jenkin, the entryway step where shoes were removed, and beyond that the suggestion of rooms and shadows. It wasn't large, but it was theirs. It also had been suspiciously affordable. Their real estate agent, Ms. Kuroda, had been polite, careful, and just hesitant enough to make Ellie feel like they were getting away with something. "It is a very good opportunity," Ms. Kuroda had said during the viewing. "Not many houses at this price in this ward." Mark had smiled too quickly. "We're lucky." Ellie remembered the agent's pause, the faint tightening at the corners of her eyes. Yes, lucky. There were rules in Japan about property disclosures, stigmatized properties, places where something terrible had happened. The agent had mentioned it gently, like a person testing thin ice. "This house," she'd said, "there was an incident. Some people might not feel comfortable." Ellie had looked at Mark, waiting for him to ask questions, to prod, to demand details. He'd only nodded, reassuring, as if he already knew and had already decided it didn't matter. "Thanks for telling us," he'd said. "We're okay." Ellie assumed it was something distant. An elderly owner dying quietly. A previous tenant who'd become ill. Sad, yes, but life moved through walls all the time. She didn't push. She didn't want to push. She wanted to imagine putting up photos and buying plants and learning the neighborhood roots. viewing tragedy. They signed. They paid. They moved in with cardboard boxes and optimism, and the smell of fresh tatami mats that made Ellie think of clean straw and sun-warmed paper. On their first night, they ate convenience store onigiri on the living room floor because the table hadn't been delivered yet. Outside, rain tapped the windows like polite fingers. Mark raised his plastic bottle of green tea. To Tokyo. Ellie clinked her bottle against his. To our home. They laughed. The laugh felt too loud in the house, like sound that didn't know where to settle. When they finally lay down, they did it in the spare room because it had been easiest to clear. Futons laid out side by side, the thin mattress and blankets smelling faintly of detergent. The walls were bare. A streetlight threw a pale rectangle onto the ceiling. Ellie fell asleep to the quiet hum of distant traffic and the soft ticking of the heater. At some point in the night, she woke because the air felt wrong. Not cold exactly, not hot, just thick, like humidity that didn't belong in winter. The streetlight rectangle had shifted. The shadow on the ceiling looked like it had developed corners. Ellie blinked. Her eyes struggled to focus, still half drowned in sleep. A sound came from somewhere deeper in the house. A slow drag, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. Ellie listened. Her breath held itself. Drag, pause, drag. She turned her head toward Mark. He was asleep on his side, mouth slightly open. His breath made a small whistle. Mark, she whispered. The dragging stopped. Silence swelled like water, filling a room. Ellie waited, staring into the dark. Then, as if in answer, the sound began again, closer this time, unmistakably inside the hallway. Drag, pause, drag. A faint wetness threaded through it. The noise of something that didn't slide cleanly. Ellie's throat tightened. She thought of rats, of pipes, of some misaligned box shifting in settling wood. But the sound had intent. It felt patient. It felt like it knew where they were. She sat up. The hallway beyond the room was dark, but not fully. A dim spill of light came from the kitchen nightlight they had plugged in earlier. Ellie could see the edge of the corridor, and in that edge, something moved. Not a person, not a shape with limbs, a presence like a smear of shadow, a thickening of darkness that pulled itself along the floor. Ellie's body went cold all at once, the way it does when your brain recognizes danger before your thoughts can name it. The shadow stopped just beyond the doorway. Then slowly, something rose into view at the threshold. A head, a small head, a child's head, pale and wet, hair clumped and stringy as if it had been soaking. The face looked wrong, too still, too slack, like a mask that didn't fit. Its eyes were open. They were dark pools that reflected nothing. Ellie tried to scream. Her voice snagged somewhere behind her tongue, trapped by fear. The child's mouth opened slightly, as if tasting the air, and then it made a sound. Not words, not crying. gasping inhale, like a breath pulled through water. Ellie's heart slammed so hard it hurt. She lurched backward, grabbing Mark's shoulder. "Mark," she choked, finally finding her voice. "Mark, wake up." Mark startled upright, confused, blinking. The child at the doorway vanished. Not ran, not retreated, just wasn't there. Ellie stared at the threshold, at the empty hallway. The dim kitchen light sat harmlessly in the distance, soft and ordinary. What is it?" Mark asked, rubbing his eyes. "I saw someone," Ellie said, her voice shaking so badly it sounded like another person. "A child, right there, in the doorway." Mark's gaze flicked to the hall. He didn't get up. He didn't look like someone who was about to search the house. He looked like someone trying to decide how to react. "There's no one," he said too quickly. "I saw," Ellie's hands trembled. "Mark, I saw a boy. His hair was wet. He was staring at me." Mark exhaled, the breath heavy. "You're exhausted. Jet lag." "No," Ellie snapped, sharper than she meant. "Don't do that. Don't make me feel stupid. This wasn't a dream." Mark's face tightened. For a fraction of a second, something like fear flashed there. Then he forced a smile. Okay, we'll check." He stood, walked into the hallway, flicked on the overhead light. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone. The corridor was narrow and clean. Mark checked the front door. Locked, the windows, closed, the closet, empty. Then he returned, pulling the blanket around Ellie like a parent tucking in a child. "It's fine," he murmured. "It's just the first night. Houses make noises. You're in a new place." Ellie nodded because she didn't know what else to do. Her heart was still pounding like it wanted to break through her ribs. But as Mark lay back down, he stared at the ceiling longer than he should have. And when Ellie finally drifted back into a restless sleep, she dreamed of a small handprint pressed against the inside of the glass, sliding down slowly, leaving a trail of moisture that looked too dark to be rain. The next morning, Tokyo was bright and busy, and perfectly indifferent. Ellie tried to shake it off as they unpacked. She opened windows to let in fresh air. She bought a small plant from a local shop and placed it on the windowsill like a declaration. Life belongs here now. Mark worked from home, his laptop set up in the corner of the living room. Ellie wandered room to room, making plans for where everything would go. Their house creaked as it warmed, as if settling. For a while, it felt normal, until Ellie found the stain. It was in the storage closet under the stairs, a narrow space that smelled faintly of old wood. She had been looking for a place to put extra bedding when her eye caught a mark on the floorboards, a dark discoloration, uneven and sunken into the grain. At first, she thought it was water damage. But water stains have a softness, a bloom. This looked like something had seeped deep and refused to leave. Ellie crouched and touched it with 2 fingers. The wood was cold. Not just cool, but cold, like metal left outside in winter. She pulled her hand back and stared. The stain looked almost shaped. Not a splash, not a spill. A smear, long and narrow, as if something had been dragged. She stood quickly, a chill crawling up her spine. "Mark," she called. No answer. She stepped out of the closet and into the hallway. Mark was still at his laptop, headphones on, eyes fixed on his screen. Ellie watched him for a moment, noticing his posture, hunched, tense, like he was trying to make himself smaller. "Mark," she said again, louder. He startled, yanking one ear cup off. "What?" "There's a stain in the closet," Ellie said. "It's weird, like something got dragged." Mark's eyes flicked away, just for a second. "Probably old water damage. You know, humidity." "It's cold." Ellie crossed her arms. "Like ice cold." Mark forced a laugh. "Maybe there's a draft." Ellie studied him. "Why are you being like this?" "Like what?" "Like someone who doesn't want to know. Like someone who already knows too much." Mark leaned back, rubbing his face. "Ellie, it's fine. We're in Tokyo, we got the house. Let's not spiral because you saw something in the dark." Ellie swallowed her irritation. "Okay." She told herself it was nerves. She told herself it would pass. But the house didn't let her forget. It began with sounds. Soft thumps at night, like someone dropping a small object in the hallway. The faint creak of footsteps that didn't match their own. Whispering that might have been wind, except the windows were closed, and the whispering seemed to gather near the corners of rooms. Then came the smells. Sometimes, without warning, the living room would fill with a scent like wet hair left too long in a drain. Sour and heavy. It would come in waves, thick enough that Ellie's eyes watered. Mark would wrinkle his nose and say, "Maybe the plumbing." Old pipes. But the smell didn't come from the sinks. It came from the walls. One afternoon, Ellie was alone in the kitchen washing dishes when she felt something brush the back of her neck. She froze, soap bubbles clinging to her hands. A strand of hair slid across her skin, but Ellie's hair was tied up. Slowly she turned. No one. The kitchen was empty, sunlight slanting across the countertops. Her reflection in the window looked pale and strained. Then on the glass, a handprint appeared, not from the outside, from the inside. Small, a child's hand, fingers splayed, pressed hard enough that moisture bloomed under it. The print was so clear Ellie could see the tiny lines in the palm. Ellie stumbled backward, hitting the counter. Her soap-slick hands grabbed at the edge for balance. The handprint slid downward slowly, as if whatever made it was dragging itself down the glass. Ellie made a strangled sound. She lunged for a towel, wiping at the window. The print smudged, but beneath it, the glass felt warm, as if someone had been there, breathing against it. Ellie ran to the living room, heart in her throat, and found Mark still working. "Mark," she said, breathless. There was a handprint on the kitchen window, like a kid. Mark didn't look up right away. He typed something, then slowly removed his headphones. "You're scaring yourself," he said. Ellie stared at him. "Why won't you look? Why won't you just come see it?" Mark's jaw worked. He pushed his chair back, stood, and followed her into the kitchen. By then, the glass was clean. Only Ellie's frantic smears remained, streaking the sunlight. Mark's shoulders loosened visibly. "See," he said too gently. "Nothing." Ellie stood in the middle of the kitchen, shaking. It was there. Mark's eyes softened. He stepped closer. "Ellie, we're adjusting. This is culture shock, stress, new place. It's normal to feel weird." Ellie looked at him, really looked. The way his gaze kept drifting toward the hallway. The way his hands were clenched. The way his reassurance felt rehearsed, like a script he'd practiced in advance. "Did Ms. Kuroda tell you something I don't know?" Ellie asked suddenly. Mark blinked. "What?" "About the house." Ellie's voice was small now. "The incident, what was it?" Mark hesitated just long enough for Ellie's stomach to drop. "It was a death," he said finally. "A long time ago." "What kind of death?" Ellie demanded. Mark swallowed. "It's not important." Ellie felt something in her chest crack open. Not quite anger, not quite fear. "Not important." "Mark, I'm seeing things. I'm hearing things. You're tired," Mark snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry. I don't want this to ruin what we worked for." Ellie's eyes stung. "What happened here?" Mark stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. "I don't know details," he lied. Ellie knew it was a lie because his voice changed. His accent tightened. His words became careful, rounded, like stones placed precisely. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." But the house heard the question, and it answered. That night, Ellie woke to the sound again. Drag, pause, drag. Only now it came from inside the room with them. Ellie's eyes snapped open. The ceiling was dark, the streetlight rectangle faint. Something moved beside the futon. Mark was sleeping. Ellie couldn't move. Her body felt pinned heavy, as if the air itself had become thick syrup. The dragging sound grew louder. Ellie's gaze slid downward. At the edge of the futon, a small figure was crawling. A boy, pale skin, hair hanging in wet ropes over his face. His limbs moved wrong, jerky, stiff, like joints that didn't want to bend. His fingers hooked into the blanket, pulling. Drag, pause, drag. Ellie tried to scream. Nothing came out. The boy's head tilted upward slowly, like a puppet being lifted by a string. His hair parted just enough for Ellie to see one eye. Black, glossy, too wide. Then the boy's mouth opened, and Ellie smelled it. Not breath, not decay, something worse, like stagnant water and metal, like a sink full of rusted nails. The boy's lips split into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. It looked like the face was tearing. Ellie's body finally jolted free. She lurched backward, slamming into the wall. Mark woke with a shout. "Ellie, what?" The boy vanished again. dissolving into the darkness as if he'd never existed. Ellie gasped for air, like she'd been underwater. "I saw him," she sobbed. "Mark, I saw him. He was crawling. He was right there." Mark sat up, breathing hard. He stared at the spot where Ellie pointed. His face looked sick, not confused, not skeptical, sick with recognition. Ellie's blood ran colder. "You've seen him too." Mark didn't answer. Ellie climbed to her feet, trembling with fury and terror. "Mark, tell me what you know." Mark's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a person trapped in a burning room, trying to decide whether to run or to pretend the smoke wasn't real. "It was a boy," he said finally, voice hoarse. "A kid who lived here. He died here." Ellie stared at him, waiting. Mark swallowed hard. He was murdered. The word landed like a blade. Ellie's hands went numb. Murdered. Mark nodded once, eyes shiny. "That's why it was cheap." Ellie's throat tightened until it hurt. "And you knew." Mark flinched. "I didn't want to tell you." "You didn't want to tell me." Ellie's voice rose, cracking. "So you let me move into a murder house without telling me." "It was supposed to be over," Mark said desperately. "It was years ago." It was disclosed. But Ellie, people die everywhere. It's a city. It's history. It doesn't mean. It means something, Ellie shouted. "Something is in this house." As if in response, the heater clicked off. The room dropped several degrees in an instant. Ellie's breath puffed white. Mark stared at her, horrified. From the hallway came a sound that made Ellie's stomach turn. A child's laugh, thin, wet, like someone giggling with water in their lungs. Ellie turned toward the doorway. The hall was darker than it should have been, and in the darkness, a shape moved. Not the boy, something taller, something that moved like it had too many joints. It slid forward, dragging itself, and Ellie realized with sick clarity that the dragging sound wasn't footsteps. It was hair, long hair, spilling across the floor, pulled along like a shroud. The shape rose slowly, the air around it writhing. A woman's silhouette, head angled downward, hair veiling her face completely. Ellie's heart seized. The woman's head snapped up. The hair parted, and Ellie saw eyes like deep bruises, and a mouth stretched wide, wide enough to look wrong, as if the jaw had been unhinged for years and forgotten how to close. The woman didn't speak. She exhaled, and the exhale sounded like a death rattle. Ellie screamed. Mark grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the doorway, toward the light switch. His fingers fumbled. The overhead light flickered on. The hallway was empty. No woman, no boy. Only the lingering smell of wet hair. And on the floor, a long dark streak, fresh, glistening, like something had been dragged there moments ago. Ellie stared at it, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Mark's face had gone ashen. Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. "What else do you know, Mark?" Mark stared at the streak on the floor, like he wanted to pretend it wasn't there. Then he said, very quietly, "The boy didn't die alone. They didn't sleep after that. They sat in the living room with every light on, both of them wrapped in blankets like survivors of a shipwreck. The city outside kept moving. Trains ran, cars passed, a neighbor's door shut. Somewhere, someone laughed. In here, the house held its breath. Ellie's voice was raw. "Tell me." Mark stared at his hands. "Ms. Kuroda told me the basics. She said the boy was found in the house, and there were rumors about the mother, about what happened after." Ellie's stomach churned. Rumors. Mark swallowed. "They said she never left. They said after the boy died, she stayed here, alone for days." Ellie felt a cold nausea. Why? Mark's eyes filled. Because she was waiting for him to come home. Ellie's skin prickled. The image formed uninvited. A woman in a quiet house, sitting in darkness, listening for footsteps that would never come. And then Ellie whispered. Mark's voice dropped. "They found her too." Ellie stared, dead. Mark nodded. "In the upstairs room, the one we haven't used yet." Ellie's mouth went dry. "So this is accursed property," Mark said, voice trembling. "A stigmatized house. I thought, Ellie, I thought it was superstition. I thought it was stories." Ellie shook her head slowly, the betrayal blooming hot under her fear. "You thought it was stories, and you didn't tell me." Mark's shoulders sagged. "I wanted this. I wanted it so badly. You wanted it, Tokyo. A home. And this was the only way we could afford it." Ellie's eyes burned. "So you gambled with my safety." Mark flinched, tears spilling now. "I'm sorry." For a moment, Ellie couldn't speak. Then the television turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, hissing loud in the silent room. Ellie and Mark froze. The remote was on the table. No one touched it. The static shifted. A shape formed in the snow of the screen, like a shadow, moving behind fogged glass. Then a child's face pressed forward, emerging through the static, as if the TV were a membrane. The boy's features were flattened, distorted by the noise, but his eyes were unmistakable. Black, empty, watching. Ellie's throat tightened. She tried to stand, but her legs shook too much. The boy's mouth moved, and the TV sound changed. No longer static. A whisper, not Japanese, not English. Something older than language. A sound that crawled into Ellie's ears like insects. Mark grabbed the remote and slammed the power button. Nothing happened. He pressed again. Again. The screen remained on. The boy's face growing clearer, closer, as if he were pushing his way out. Ellie saw details now, bruising around the boy's neck. Dark marks like fingers had pressed too hard. A swollen lip. A cut that split one eyebrow. Her stomach heaved. Mark flung the remote across the room. It hit the wall with a crack. The TV flickered. The boy's face smiled. Then the screen went black. In the silence that followed, something knocked gently from inside the wall behind them. Tap, 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 like a child asking to be let out. Ellie began to sob. Mark stood, shaking, eyes wild. "We're leaving." Ellie nodded, barely able to breathe. "Yes, now." They ran to the bedroom, grabbed passports, wallets, coats. Ellie's hands trembled so badly she dropped her phone twice. Mark yanked open the front door, and the air outside was wrong. The streetlight outside didn't glow. It flickered weakly, like a dying candle. The street beyond looked stretched. The buildings seemed too tall, the distance too far, as if the world had been pulled like taffy. Ellie stepped onto the threshold. The sound of the city was gone. No trains, no cars, no voices. Only silence, thick and heavy. Ellie's breath fogged. Mark tried to step out. His foot hovered over the step. Then the front door slammed shut on its own, with a bang that shook the house. Ellie screamed, grabbing the handle. Mark yanked too. The door didn't budge. It was as if the house had locked them in. The lights flickered. In the hallway behind them, a low, wet sound began, like hair dragging. Ellie turned slowly. At the far end of the hall, the woman stood. Her hair spread across the floor like spilled ink. Her body was bent at an angle that made Ellie's spine ache in sympathy. The woman's head tilted, listening. Beside her, half hidden by the curtain of hair, the boy crawled forward. Drag, pause, drag. Ellie's knees threatened to give out. Mark backed up until he hit the wall. "No," he whispered. "No." The woman moved. Not walking, gliding. Her hair flowed behind her, dragged across the floor, leaving that dark, wet streak. The boy followed, jerking forward like a broken toy. Ellie's mind screamed, "Run!" But where? The woman's mouth opened wider than before. Her jaw cracked audibly, as if bone had snapped. A sound poured out, part scream, part sob, part something inhuman. Ellie clapped her hands over her ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't just in the air. It vibrated in her teeth, in her skull. The lights blew out. Darkness swallowed them. Ellie felt something cold wrap around her ankle. Small fingers. The boy. He pulled. Ellie screamed, kicking, but the grip was iron. She felt her body sliding across the floor. The Jenkins step biting into her back as she was dragged toward the hallway. Mark shouted her name and grabbed her wrists, pulling with all his strength. Ellie's skin burned. Panic made her vision tunnel. In the dark, she saw the boy's face close to the floor, hair sticking to his cheeks. His eyes rolled up toward her, and in those eyes, Ellie saw something that wasn't just emptiness. It was need, hunger, not for food, for company, for someone else to stay. Ellie kicked harder, connecting with something solid. The grip loosened for a split second. Mark yanked her free. They stumbled backward into the living room, slamming the sliding door shut behind them. Mark fumbled for the lights. Nothing worked. Ellie's breath came in sobbing bursts. The dragging sound resumed outside the sliding door. Slow, patient. Ellie's voice trembled. "We can't leave." Mark's voice was ragged. "We have to. There has to be a way." Ellie's eyes adjusted to the dark. The faint glow from Mark's laptop still pulsed on the table. A weak rectangle of light. In that light, Ellie saw something on the wall. Writing, not there before. Dark characters smeared across the plaster, as if written with wet fingers. Ellie didn't read Japanese well, but she knew one phrase from language lessons and trained signs and polite conversations. "Dame. No, not allowed." Below it, another word she recognized. "Kita. Go home." Except the characters were messy, wrong, like a child trying to imitate. And beneath those words, a shape, 2 stick figures, drawn crudely. One tall, one smaller, both enclosed inside a box. A house. Ellie stared, frozen. Mark followed her gaze, his breath caught. The sliding door rattled softly, not someone shaking it, something pressing its weight against it. Ellie whispered, "It wants us here." Mark's voice broke. "It wants you." Ellie turned to him sharply. "What does that mean?" Mark looked away. Then he said, voice shaking, "Ms. Kuroda said sometimes these houses don't accept everyone. Sometimes the curse attaches to a person, a visitor, a tenant." Ellie's stomach dropped. "And you still—" "I didn't believe it," Mark cried. "I didn't believe any of it until now." The sliding door rattled again. A soft sound came from the other side. A child's voice, not whispering anymore. Clear. "Akasen. Mother." Ellie's blood turned to ice. Then the woman's voice layered over it, low, broken, full of grief that had curdled into something monstrous. "Kishite. Give him back." Ellie's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't breathe. Mark grabbed Ellie's shoulders, desperate. "Listen to me. We need help. We need someone who knows." A loud crack sounded from upstairs. Like wood splitting, Ellie and Mark both flinched. Then came footsteps above them. Not adult footsteps. Small, quick running. Back and forth, like a child playing in the upstairs room. Except the pattern wasn't playful. It was frantic, like a child trying to escape something unseen. Ellie's eyes darted upward. That room. Mark's voice was a whisper now. That's where she was found. The running above them stopped abruptly. Silence. Then thump. Something heavy dropped onto the floor upstairs. Ellie's skin crawled. A slow, wet sound began, descending the staircase. Not footsteps. Something being dragged. Care. Ellie backed up until she hit the kitchen counter. Mark. Mark looked around wildly, as if searching for logic in a nightmare. His gaze landed on the open window in the kitchen. It was small, but maybe. He rushed to it, shoved it open. Cold air rushed in, sharp and real, smelling like rain and metal. Mark leaned out. Outside, the street looked normal again. Lights, a distant passing car. The city's hum returned. Hope flared in Ellie's chest like a match. "We can get out," Mark said, voice shaking. "We can." A hand appeared on Mark's shoulder. Not Ellie's. Small, pale, the boy had emerged silently into the kitchen, hair dripping, face blank. Mark froze, eyes wide. Ellie screamed, lunging forward. The boy's fingers tightened on Mark's shoulder, and Mark's body jerked as if a current had passed through him. Ellie saw Mark's face change, his eyes unfocusing, his jaw slackening. The boy's mouth opened, and the smell of stagnant water poured out. Then Mark turned his head slowly toward Ellie. His eyes were no longer his. They were black, glossy, reflecting nothing. Ellie stumbled backward in horror. Mark. Mark smiled. Behind him, the woman appeared in the doorway, hair dragging across the floor, her mouth opening impossibly wide. Ellie's mind screamed, "This is how it takes you. This is how it makes you stay." Ellie grabbed the nearest thing, an iron kettle from the stove, and hurled it at the boy. The kettle struck the child's head with a dull clang. The boy's grip loosened. Mark staggered, blinking, gasping, as if waking from drowning. Ellie grabbed Mark's arm and yanked him toward the window. Now, they shoved the window wider, ignoring the scrape of wood, ignoring the way the house seemed to groan in protest. Mark climbed first, half falling through. Ellie followed, squeezing through the tight frame. As Ellie's legs cleared the sill, something cold wrapped around her wrist. The woman, her hair whipped upward like a living thing, coiling around Ellie's arm. Her grip felt like ice and grief. Ellie screamed, clawing at the hair. It felt wet, too wet, like it had been soaked for years. Mark grabbed Ellie's other arm and pulled with all his strength. Ellie's shoulder screamed in pain. The woman's face pressed close, hair parting just enough for Ellie to see eyes full of rage and sorrow. The woman's mouth moved, and Ellie understood, not with language, but with feeling. Stay with us. Stay with him." Ellie sobbed, shaking her head. "No." Mark pulled harder. For a second, Ellie felt herself slipping back toward the window, toward the house. Then the hair snapped free, with a sound like tearing cloth. Ellie fell onto the wet ground outside, gasping. Mark fell beside her, both of them scrambling away from the house on hands and knees, like animals escaping a trap. They made it to the sidewalk, panting, soaked in rain and sweat, staring back. The house looked normal, quiet, still. A neighbor walked past at the corner, glancing at them briefly with mild confusion, then continuing on as if nothing strange had happened. Ellie's body shook violently. Mark's voice was broken. "We're out." Ellie stared at the house, at the window they had escaped through. In the upstairs window, a small face appeared. The boy. His eyes were dark holes, his expression blank. Behind him, the shadow of long hair moved. Ellie felt her breath catch. The boy lifted a hand and pressed it to the glass. a perfect, wet handprint. Then he smiled, and the smile was not a child's smile. It was the smile of something that knew it had time. Ellie whispered, barely audible. "It followed us, didn't it?" Mark didn't answer, because in the silence around them, Ellie heard it, a soft, dragging sound, not from the house, from behind her. Ellie turned slowly. On the wet pavement, a dark streak stretched toward them, glistening under the streetlight, like hair had been dragged there. Ellie's stomach dropped into nothing. Mark's eyes widened in terror, and from somewhere, very close, right behind Ellie's ear, came a child's whisper, so soft it could have been her own breath. "Aucupants, if you made it to the end, check your locks. Not because they'll keep the horror out, but because sometimes they keep it in." If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you want the next nightmare to take place. Please also check out my other videos. And remember, some homes don't want to be lived in. They want to be inhabited. This has been Whispers in the Dark. Sleep well if you can.